Hi, it's Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions, and we are all about the universal constructs, which is what is kicking off the negative dynamic. So we have started this series, I guess 9 weeks ago. We started it with mindfulness and being present without judgment. And we have walked through the key steps to live a happier and healthier life. Part 2, emotional regulation, which is taking us through building emotional resiliency and regulation, understanding the negative narrative and bad brain, understanding stress management, learning about grief and that we all are grieving and it is waving through us in our everyday, and taking time for ourselves to grieve builds emotional resiliency. And that there are 1,000 things that we are grieving, that it's not just about loss. And then we're doing some stress management. We get into the gratitude and suffering spectrum. We talked about perspective and having these perceived realities that are triangulating us in these despair and suffering moments. We're learning about and learned about distress tolerance, which is allowing us to get out of our own ways and our own distress and high stress moments. And here we are tying it together. I kept promising you we would get here, and here we are. Universal constructs, go back to the video that explains them, are 5 things we all have. And because of the different ways in which we engage with them, what we find is relationships are so hard because we keep getting triggered by these 5 needs. And we think that somebody else has the need and we don't have it. Scarcity mindset, the 4 barriers to trauma, or the 4 barriers to success that trauma brings on. Scarcity mindset. Somebody else has it, so therefore I don't. All or nothing thinking, anxious mindset. It all comes down to these 5 universal constructs. It's just so wonderful how it all wraps together. Everything we've been talking about is culminating in this dynamic. And the negative dynamic is we have an emotional reaction. It spurs cognitive distortions, invalid data points that then come in and acknowledge our attachment. It creates enough stress. Our insecure attachment or our avoidant attachment comes up. When that comes up, we start building and reinforcing our negative narrative. The negative narrative will then reinforce and bring up our trauma and past chronic stress into our present. Here's our filter. This is the filter of perceived reality. We start invoicing, or we start triangulating and engaging with others as if they are asked and implicitly asked to be present in our perceived reality. That causes perceived expectations. Well, they should have done that and they could have done that. How many times have we said that? Like, we're so angry and disappointed by perceived expectations that we expected somebody to do for them. Or we get lost in ruminations on perceived expectations of what we should and could have been doing. That causes an emotional reaction, those anger outbursts that we have or we've shut down so long, the volcano explodes, or we're just dramatic and we have all this emotion, and it comes back to emotional reactions. And these emotional reactions is what is feeding the cognitive distortions. And as we're getting into these lost thoughts, we start to find a lot of fear that we are connected to. And we really create, I don't know that this is what I want. So now that we know what the cycle is of the negative dynamic, I want to go through each section so that we can explore it further. Starting with emotional reactions is really where the universal construct is kind of striking first. And there's equitable opportunity. It can go to attachment, it can go to trauma, it can go to perceived expectations. But we are starting in emotional reactions, but technically the cycle can start anywhere. So looking at emotional reactions and cognitive distortions is, as we are in the emotional brain, the amygdala, remember we are in a survival mode. So the amygdala is a long hallway with a bunch of sets of doors. And so the amygdala is running up and down that hallway, peeking into all these doorways, sometimes hovering in doorways because they want to flip a switch to fight, flight, freeze, and to react immediately. So as an effort for survival, our brain will create these emotional reactions so that we can have a quick response in order to survive. And remember, the brain does not have nuances of stress. A stress is a death, right? All or nothing thinking, and it comes from the brain. Stress is death. That is how it all started. That is why we are here where we are today, is once there is some kind of stress, emotional brain kicks on, and stress is death, and it's trying to react as quickly as possible. What also is happening as it's going down this corridor, remember that we have that implicit memory for survival. It's got 1,000 windows in the background that are running and open at all times for the effort of survival. The digital mode network that we talked about in the beginning of all of these conversations says that we're just sitting there scanning for all possible all potential threats and what the solution will be. So when all of that is happening, what we're doing is we're pulling a bunch of invalid data points to make there be a reason for the amygdala to start coming off, right? So the shoulda, couldas, the what ifs, the all or nothing, overgeneralization, personalization, black or white thinking, catastrophizing, all of those are cognitive distortions. And they're thoughts that we have in order to be able to think very, very quickly, but it's invalid. It's invalid data points. It is not serving. This is not serving us, and therefore it's going to make us feel insecure. Attachment triggers. It's going to make us feel insecure. It's pulling back from the universal construct. It makes us feel insecure. It makes us feel we don't belong. It makes us feel like we are not seen and heard. And that pulls down into universal construct, back up, and reinforces and triggers attachment. Attachment is looking at whether or not we fear abandonment, and fearing abandonment means we're Lenny with the mouse, right? Come here, come here, come here, come here, come here, come here. Don't leave me, right? It gets very annoying when you have somebody who's clingy and suffering from insecure attachment because they are so involved. They will send 50 texts in 2 hours. They can't stop themselves. They cannot stop themselves. They need that reassurance, that validation. And so that, and then you have people are like, whoa, too much, right? Slow down. And they start to shut down. When emotions come around, they start to shut down, that avoidant attachment. And that is going to start because of what it's doing, where it is in our brain at that point in time. It's going to pull up all of our narratives from our past, whether or not we're good enough, smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like us. All of that's going to pull up. And it's going to be like, see, you always are failing. Cognitive distortion. You never get it right. Cognitive distortion. And it's going to come in and again, pull up the amygdala. All your past stressors and trauma are coming up, and now they are filtering into the here and now. You have a filter that's coming on. So like a photographer has multiple lenses, our brain has multiple lenses. And when we are in a triggered negative dynamic, we have the telephoto lens on. We are zoomed in very, very close to what we find as important. And we cannot see anything other than that. I do love photography. I just got a 200-600, a Canon 200-600. So like the dolphins are swimming and I'm like, yeah, I can see the teeth. I know exactly the mackerel you had for breakfast. It's really cool. It's a really fun experience. But what I often miss is like if I'm too far zoomed in, I'm trying to predict where that dolphin is. So as soon as it comes up, I'm grabbing the shot. And what I'm doing is it's so zoomed in, I really have no idea where I'm at. I think I'm there, but I'm not. And I'm missing more shots than I'm actually taking because it's a new learning experience to grab that depth of field. And so no matter what, in photography or in life, zooming out so you can understand what you have, your landscape, what's happening, and then as it's happening, zoom in is going to help you and ensure that you're not using the wrong lens. Because what we do when we use the wrong lens is we have reality distortion and triangulation. So as we are using the wrong lens, it's what I call invoicing, right? If you are in a negative cycle, then life feels overwhelming. It feels helpless. It feels hopeless. It feels impossible. And people will put that lens up there that they can't see, they can't receive information or not. Have you ever talked to somebody who's in an anxious or depressed state? And you're like, hey, what about this? Well, this is going to happen. And you're like, what about this? Well, no, that'll never work because of this. And you're like, who let Debbie Downer to the party? My goodness. Like, is there anything that has any value in your life? Or are you really just this angry and upset? And that is that negative perception is we just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing things away. And we're missing the opportunities to be able to ingratiate things. We're missing that growth mindset. This is where the growth mindset gets cut, and we find ourselves further and further into suffering and despair. And as we're in suffering and despair, remember the Cartman drama triangle that I talked about several weeks ago. Go back to that video. The Cartman drama triangle says that when you're on the triangle, you find other people to be on the triangle, perceived reality. You're bringing people in, or you're bringing people in to your perceived reality. And so you're implicitly asking people to occupy. Some people will naturally occupy because they're already on the triangle. They're already a victim. They know how to play victim. They know how to enable a victim. They know how to persecute and make somebody else a victim. They know the game. And they're going to do it. And when I say that, I don't mean that people are malicious and they're like, wow, look at you. You're a freaking psychopath. This is what you do. Like, you just go and play victim and tell people they're persecutors and ask people to like coax you while you sit there in a hurt state. No, people are not consciously aware of it. This is an effort to survive. The brain has created these archetypes in order to find some semblance of understanding of difficult times in their life. And it's been reinforced by behaviors because other people have been in these situations and reinforcing the behaviors, and it just happens, right? We talked about the family tree and all the familial wounds. This is some of the stuff that comes from those familial wounds is internal family systems really goes into the roles that we play in our family and how those roles really take on these perspectives that we build and these perceived realities that we have. And so as that is happening and as we're stuck in these triangulations, and remember, once you realize you're in a triangulated state, grounding and taking one step out, laying out your valid data points helps you to get out of that triangulated state. And then you get into perceived expectations and emotional expression again, right? And so as a part of the persecution, victim, and rescuer Cartman triangle, a lot of times you'll hear people in what they call gaslighting. Well, you should have done this and you could have done that. And that perceived expectation is a part of them reinforcing their suffering. And again, a lot of people, no shame in the game, will get pulled into it like, oh, well, I don't want to piss them off because I have to work with this person, or I don't want to piss them off, it's my mom. Whatever the case may be, there's this sense of performance, this duty to perform that keeps us held into this triangulated pattern. And what eventually will happen is somebody will emotionally shut down and say, I just can't be present with this, but I can't get out of it. Or they will emotionally explode and they will have either a dramatic outburst or an anger outburst to try to find a perceived sense of control. In an effort for us to find a perceived sense of control, we end up creating chaos in the wake. And so what we want to do is, as complicated and compounded and overwhelming this cycle is in the negative dynamic, it is exactly the same energy as we talked about last week to get into a positive cycle as it is to get into a negative cycle. Same energy. So we ground, we find mindfulness, acceptance and letting go. We find and neutralize the cycle, and it does not matter where you neutralize it. Find where your neutral is. If you've you know what, I had a pretty awesome upbringing, so I have some bad relationship decisions and it makes me insecure and I fear abandonment. But ultimately, if I lean back on my childhood, I would say it's a solid. It's a solid. A good parents, they worked hard. They weren't there, but I knew that they were working hard to provide for me. I'm good. I can ground knowing that I have a pretty good attachment when I don't bring in irrelevant information from my past relationships. And I ground in that. I stay pretty present in that, and then everything else kind of fades out. And remember, we're trying to hit those 5 universal constructs, because when we find a sense of agency and value, everything else starts to feel easier and a lot more able to accomplish. And that will give us that grappling that we need, that foothold that we need to take one step in the right direction, in the positive direction. So one meaningful step. So it doesn't matter what you do, it matters that you do something. It does not matter how big or small it is. It matters that you do it. So what does that really mean? It means that if we are, it's the beginning of the year, weight loss is usually on everybody's mind. I don't know with Ozempic, I'd be curious to see the research on if it still is, or if everyone's like, no, there's a shot, I don't think about it. I'm very curious in 5 years when people don't want to take shots every month, what the health of the world is, or who have been taking shots for every month. I'd love to know what that longitudinal study is going to be. But for those who are not wanting to take a shot and, kind of force lack of appetite, as we are going into that restricting cycle and we're saying, I don't have a good I don't have a good relationship with food. I don't have a good relationship with my body. I don't value my body. I just sit here and I wallow and I suffer and I eat crap that I don't want to eat. And I'm so shameful of what I eat. And then I'm trying to cut it out. So I'm restricting and I'm not eating that. So I still don't value myself. I'm just eating carrots and celery and salad. There's nothing fun about it. Nothing good happens. I don't love this. I still don't love my body, but at least I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And we're still in the negative cycle. We're doing something good, but we're in the negative cycle because we don't have balance. We don't have empowerment. We just have shame and guilt that is telling us that we don't deserve to enjoy anything, and we can't enjoy, and we have no value to enjoy anything, because even when we did all this stuff that made us fat, that made us overweight, and made us obese, we still didn't enjoy it. We just kind of did it because we didn't know better, and we just kind of got into it. And now we still don't enjoy it. We still don't like ourselves anymore. We still don't value ourselves. But we have a perceived sense of control because we're withholding everything. But then what happens is life happens. And the sweets are still there. The temptation is still there. The binging is still there. Watching TV is still there. The triggers of why we get into these mindless eating habits are still there because we didn't change anything. We just said, I don't like this relationship, so we cut it. And then at some point in time, and it's coming up like this week, spoiler alert, it's coming up. If this is you, it's coming up. Be aware. You will succumb. You will say, life is too unpredictable. It's too chaotic, and I can't do it. And you're going to overindulge in an effort to succumb to that chaos. More shame and guilt, more avoidance, more escapism. Still no value in any of that, right? You don't have value for yourself in any of that. You still have the shame and guilt. You've changed a few behaviors. So what it looks like to recover is to ground and accept, empower yourself, find intentionality and balance. And so what that may look like is, I don't love how I mindlessly eat in front of the TV because I'm eating way too much. I'm overeating. I'm filling a plate. I do not need to eat that much. Here are all the things that when it comes to food and my interaction with food, here are the things that I don't like. And here are the ways I can control it. I can get a smaller plate. I can eat with a smaller spoon or fork. I can change how I interact with my food, right? I can change, instead of mindlessly eating in front of the TV, I can go and sit down and say, I'm going to eat over this amount of time. I'm not going to have distractions. I can be intentional with my eating. I can make one healthy decision a day, right? I can choose to order a salad instead of a hamburger or steak one time a week. I can choose to drink a glass of water. So there are things that are pretty low-hanging fruit that if you have just the slightest bit of attention paid and intentional energy towards it, what you're doing is you're finding balance. You're not saying that I'm never going to eat sugar and fat again. I'm never going to do it. I'm just never going to do it. Instead, you're saying, you know what? I accept, I am aware, and I accept that I have a poor relationship with my body and food. And so when food comes around, I know that I have no willpower. I will probably overengage. So what I choose to do is have a protein shake before I go out and hang out with people, because then at least I'll feel more full and I'm less likely to overengage because I can continue to tell myself, well, you are full, you had your meal. I can choose to have water. Instead of having 3 glasses of wine, I can choose to have water every time I order wine, I order water, and I don't order another glass of wine until my water is done. These little changes are finally building value in your mind. You are giving yourself value. You are giving yourself compassion, emotional resiliency. You're finding your growth mindset. So you're looking at this like a science experiment. Okay, so when I drink a glass of water for every mixed drink I had, I feel really good the next day. And it feels really good not to spend $100 on alcohol when I go out. I kind of really like that. I feel amazing that I was able to eat, a hamburger, but I also ate 3 salads and I feel so much better and I don't feel bloated anymore. And I really like what I'm doing. I like these decisions I'm making and I don't feel overwhelmed by it. I feel like I have agency. I get to choose my own path and my path isn't being chosen for me. I feel like I have value. I feel like I'm doing something good for myself and I really like it. So that's the little changes. We're not making massive changes. And in my coaching program, this is what I'm helping people do. Is find that awareness, acceptance, and action. And we have skilled outline tasks to be able to be successful, to find these little changes in your mindset, because your mind has neuroplasticity and you can actually change how you think, which means you can change how you relate to others and how you relate to yourself. And as you get stuck in these overwhelming negative dynamics, you are grounding, staying present, finding one way to find balance and intentional interactions, and it's changing people's lives. I am Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions. Please like this. Share this with people who are struggling with that negative cycle, who seem to keep getting stuck and feel like they're overwhelmed, like they don't really understand that there's any hope or help to get them out of this suffering and out of this difficulty. I am here to help you. Thank you so much.